Anyway, welcome to Backwards Incompatible, the show where we talk about games from 30 years ago and act surprised when they don't hold up to modern standards. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Garret.
And I'm Chase.
So, what are we doing today, Chase?
Well, tonight we are going to be talking about Resident Evil, the original Resident Evil. And by original, okay, let's get this out of the way first. There are so many different versions of this game. I need to know, what version did we all play? I played the director's cut on PS1, specifically the Jill Valentine storyline. I have played the Chris Redfield storyline before, but for the purposes of this video, I played the Jill storyline. So that's the one that's going to be fresh in my memory. So this is going to be interesting as we all played different versions of this game.
I played the remake that was on the Steam shop, and I did a little bit of Chris, but I just decided to finish the game with Jill, so I switched to her.
My experience was that I played it at a friend's house on PlayStation a long time ago, so probably director's cut, not completely sure.
All right, well, Resident Evil, the game that started one of the most iconic franchises in all of gaming. This is a dumb statement, I know, but I've said this before, but you ever play a game that just feels like a video game? Like you play it and you're like, this is what a video game should feel or be like. And I think Resident Evil encapsulates that. There's puzzles, there's combat, it intertwines its gameplay into its story. Yeah, I know, saying a game feels like a game, oh wow, that's such a unique perspective. It's so philosophically deep.
Wow, watch out, Chase. The FBI are watching.
You mean stars in this case?
Star.
Umbrella. Where's my red and white umbrella? I paid money into them damn stocks.
False advertisement.
Anyway, what's your relationship with the Resident Evil franchise, and how did you feel about this game?
Well, I mean, I started off with playing the fourth game. That was my first iteration of it, which was on the Wii, funny enough.
That was the version I first played RE4 on, was the Wii version.
Oh, jeez. When you think about it, it's like one of the weirdest consoles to play a Resident Evil game on.
I don't know, I felt like because of the motion controls on the Wii, that actually helped with aiming a lot in RE4, but anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed the game series, and then I eventually played one at a friend's house, so it was great. You.
Me. Okay. So, in terms of Resident Evil, it's not the first time I've heard of it, of course, since it's such a big franchise. I have watched the movie with my sister. That's kind of like how I was first introduced to the Resident Evil franchise, but this is the first time I've ever played a Resident Evil game.
I was gonna ask, since you already brought it up, Garrett, have any of you seen the Resident Evil movies that have come out?
I've only seen one, and that was it.
I have not seen any of them in their entirety. I've seen bits and pieces when I was hanging out with my college roommate back in the day. I forget which one it was, but it's kind of interesting how Resident Evil was I feel like it was one of the first video games to get a live action movie adaptation, because those have been around since the early 2000s, the movies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the movies are barely adaptations, to be honest. They don't really have anything to do with the games, except for the most recent one on my Welcome to Raccoon City, I think they called it.
Right. They're very loose from what I've gathered. I was just curious because I haven't really seen much of them, so there's not much I can say about them other than they seem to be very cheesy and very goofy action horror movies, which I mean is fitting given Resident Evil is essentially that. Garrett, did you have anything else to say?
No, actually, I think we should just jump right into it. I'm ready.
Well, I have to say my piece first.
That's right.
And as for me, yeah, Resident Evil, it's one of those game series that you hear so much about. It's very popular, very iconic, and honestly, I didn't start playing Resident Evil games until just a few years ago. I always found it weirdly interesting just how mainstream Resident Evil is among non-gamer crowds, you know what I mean? It's I remember seeing Resident Evil merchandise, like the Umbrella Corp logo or the S.T.A.R.S logo merchandise, on bumper stickers or t-shirts everywhere, even outside of non-gaming spaces. Resident Evil was one of the first gaming franchises to just be seen out in the wild, I guess you could say. And it's not that absurd of a concept. When you get down to it, it's easy to see why. It's a zombie action franchise. It's not that high of a concept. Plenty of people are into that.
I think that since it was also inspired by a lot of works such as The Shining or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a lot of people, that's why they found it so enjoyable, because it was like you were playing in those films.
Well, I think a lot of the mainstream popularity has to do with the fact that they had the live action movies come out, so a lot of that fame wasn't just from the game series, but also those movies, so non-gamers had like another outlet for it.
Yeah, I just find it interesting that Resident Evil, of all franchises, got so popular so early on in gaming, when gaming was still a relatively niche thing.
You're a nerd.
We're all nerds here.
Yeah.
Ever since I started playing through the series a couple years ago, I've really come to enjoy it. I've played through most of the main series other than 6. 6 is the only one I haven't played yet.
It's okay.
Yeah, I've heard 6 is not the best. It's yeah. Honestly, I think 4 and 7 are my favorites. I know how unique 4 and 7, widely considered to be the best ones in the franchise, are my favorites, but what can I say? I can see why they're so beloved.
Yeah, I mean, I also really enjoyed 8 as well. That was a very well-made one.
As for the first entry, I definitely do have a soft spot for it. It's charming, it's quaint, it's very much the video game equivalent. Resident Evil as a whole, especially these early couple games, they're very much the gaming equivalent of those pulpy B-movie horror action things, you know. I would put Resident Evil alongside movies such as Evil Dead or From Dusk Till Dawn, you know. Very dumb horror action movies that are well aware of what they are, but you know what? You're just here to have fun and laugh about it with your friends on the couch while watching it. And Resident Evil fills that same type of space for video games, I feel.
Yeah, and didn't it also have a live-action trailer for it as well?
That's another thing, too. So, since I played the original one, I don't think the remastered had this. They just replaced it with actual in-game animations, but in the original one, they had FMV live-action footage for the opening and closing cutscenes of the game. I actually really enjoyed them because, A, it's just part of that, oh yeah, this was the mid-90s. FMV was a thing, and it just kind of made me a little nostalgic for that time period, because you don't really see live-action footage in video games anymore. I know there was, what was that one game that came out a year or two ago that was like all live-action footage, but anyway. And seeing these actors, especially the opening cutscene where it's black and white footage of the S.T.A.R.S helicopter looking over the Arklay Mountains, Chris is kind of narrating, a team of S.T.A.R.S has gone missing while investigating strange mysteriouses up in the mountains. It's very found footage type of vibe, you know, very Blair Witchy, but you know what the first thing came to my mind when that narration started? I don't know if you guys remember this show from the late 2000s. It was on Animal Planet or something, Lost Tapes. Do you remember that?
No.
No, I didn't really grow up with TV.
It was basically a very cheap, very low budget found footage series where each episode was of a different group of people recording themselves having an encounter with a monster or alien or something. Like, there was one that terrified me as a kid of this group of teenagers getting lost in the woods and one of them turns into a Wendigo and attacks them. And looking back on it now, it is so dumb. It is so no budget whatsoever. The acting is terrible, but hey, to like 9-year-old me, it was the most terrifying thing I've ever found.
Can I say something about this FMV? Because can you imagine them sitting out there in the dark like they were? Apparently mosquitoes were like swarming that set.
They filmed these scenes right next to a river in Japan during peak mosquito season, so I like to imagine that their screams and looks of horror on their faces are from the mosquitoes and not the monsters.
It's so real.
Method acting at its finest.
Oh, I just realized we haven't even gotten through our usual Wikipedia, diligent notes that we take. Resident Evil, released on March 22nd, 1996 for the PlayStation. Developed and published by Capcom. Directed by Shinji Mikami. Produced by Tokuro Fujiwara. And I probably butchered those names. I apologize to both of you guys.
I think they'll get over it.
Resident Evil began development as a 1989 game, Sweet Home.
Oh, yeah.
But after Capcom lost the license to this game, they decided, well, we already have all this development done. Let's just file the serial numbers off and turn it into its own thing. Mm-hmm. And that's how we got Resident Evil. A lot of the mechanics and ideas from the Sweet Home game were carried over, like it being set in a creepy mansion, that kind of stuff. Apparently, Mikami did a lot of the pre-production phase entirely by himself, so props to that guy.
Who knows how many sleepless hours he had to stay up for.
It gets results, but it is not healthy.
No, they have serious, overworking issues.
Resident Evil pulls a lot of influence and inspiration from classic horror movies. The Shining, George Romero films, Terminator in regards to the character of Albert Wesker.
Mm-hmm. I can see the resemblance.
And as most fans of the series know, in Japan it's called Biohazard, not Resident Evil. But when they were localizing the series to America, the American representatives were like, we can't really market a game called Biohazard. That's a little on the generic side. We'll just call it Resident Evil because it takes place in a residence full of evil.
Yeah, but then they eventually start calling it like Resident Evil Biohazard.
That's what they called 7. 7 is
okay.
Yeah, 7 is called Resident Evil Biohazard, and in Japan it's called Biohazard Resident Evil. Get it?
Makes sense.
I think the Yakuza series did something similar where in Japan those games are called Like a Dragon, while here in America they're called Yakuza. And in Japan when Yakuza Like a Dragon came out, it was called Like a Dragon Yakuza.
I really gotta get in and play those games.
To be honest, I have no idea what you're talking about. These Yakuza games.
You haven't heard of Yakuza?
Believe it or not, no.
Well, maybe one day we'll talk about those. But anyway, yes, the first Resident Evil game. Garrett, this was your first time playing it. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on it?
I will say, overall, is a great game. But there are points in it where I feel that it must have been hard for some people to really get into the game. Because for me, sometimes it felt kind of like meticulous in terms of puzzle solving. Like I have to go from one end of the mansion to the other end of the mansion to put this thing here, and then I have to grab this thing from this room in order to run it all the way over to the other side, and then I kill a dog, get its collar, and then I have a replacement key where then I have to go back. It's basically like that. That is literally what I think of most puzzles in this game, but there are some that are very enjoyable. There was this one where you had to like slide a statue in between two walls. I found that one really fun. It was well thought out. I will say that. It was very well thought out, and I do like the placement of the save rooms. I was at first kind of weirded out at how they were placed, but I think they were good. Overall, I feel that the game was good, but it definitely felt like going through a maze.
The save rooms, the classic typewriters, a staple of the franchise.
There's been too many times in those games due to its that game, where when I was trying to play it, where I'd get killed simply due to its controls, because I'll sit there and try and control it like, well, we do traditionally in games, but because it doesn't work that way, I'd never be able to look in the correct direction to shoot at whatever's coming at me.
This game is very much a product of its time in a lot of respects. The tank controls being chief among them. It's very much an adjustment to get used to. Mm-hmm. The weird camera placements. The save system is very much a relic in that you need to have ink ribbons on hand in order to save the game. Now, fortunately, on lower difficulties, they give you plenty of ink ribbons, so it's not much of an issue. So unless you're saving like every 2 seconds, it's not going to come up. But I can see why on harder difficulties, you would have to be very meticulous on when you save because you're going to run out of ink ribbons.
Oh, can we talk about the save room, like, musical theme since we're on that topic?
Mm-hmm. It's very much a calm eye of the storm type of feeling to it, where you've just been attacked by a horde of zombies and monsters, but inside the safe room with the typewriter in your storage box, it's okay, you're safe now. I think my favorite version is in Resident Evil 4. That little musical chime that the save rooms have in 4 is burned into my memory of just being so therapeutic and so relieving.
I actually loved it. I can tell you that I once have listened to it while a thunderstorm was kind of happening outside, and it made me fall asleep like that.
Yeah, it's nice.
It was very calming.
I recommend you look up the save room theme from 4, because that one nails that vibe perfectly, in my opinion.
I love the fourth one so much, but we're not here about the fourth one.
Yeah, you guys keep talking about the fourth one. I have no idea.
It's such a good game.
Look, I know.
But I really do like the setting of this game. It takes place in a giant mansion/laboratory in the Arklay Mountains near Raccoon City. And I just need to point this out. Where is Raccoon City? All I could find is Raccoon City, Midwestern United States. So...
Ohio.
Yes.
it's just in Ohio.
Exactly.
The mountain ranges of Ohio. I mean, Michigan is technically in the Midwest, so...
It's just in the upper north side of Michigan. There you go.
We are making it canon to backwards incompatible lore. The Arklay Mountains are in Michigan. That's where we record the Casual Cafe Arklay episodes, the Arklay Mountains.
Damn it, the dog got in again.
The first time I tried that, where if you just try to leave through the front door of the mansion, one of those demon bloody dog Cerberus things jumps out and you quickly close the door, that got me. I was not expecting that thing-looking dog to just poke its head through and like, hey, what's going on over here?
Hey, I thought you were Kibble.
Yeah, and I love that so much, though, because, like, the fact that they actually gave a reason for you to, like, not go back out because there's an enemy there or something, and it spooked you. Where most games, it just, you end up with, oh, the door's now locked for some fucking reason.
Right. We should probably explain the plot of this game, since we've been dancing around it.
Oh, yeah, probably.
This game came out in 1996 and was set in the far-off year of 1998.
On July 24th.
Basically, there's been a bunch of weird, mysterious disappearances going on in the mountains around Raccoon City. Hikers and tourists have been reported missing. There's been strange sightings of weird creatures at night in the woods.
Spooky.
The Raccoon City Police Department are like, well, we should probably do something about that, but we don't want to do it. So they call up S.T.A.R.S, Special Tactics and Rescue Service, to go in and investigate. They first send in Bravo Team. Contact with them is lost. They are gone. So then they send in Alpha Team. Alpha Team consisting of the main characters. We got Chris Redfield, action hero guy.
Bang, bang.
Yes. We have Jill Valentine, and I really like Jill's outfit. I like the blue. I like the little beret she has on. It's a really nice outfit. There's Albert Wesker. He's cool because he wears sunglasses.
My only determining trait.
Don't forget the blonde hair.
There's Barry Burton.
Barry? He's got a gun.
One of them, the guy who dies right at the beginning when he gets mauled by dogs, his name is Joseph, and I don't know how apocryphal this is. I did find this on a couple trivia listings. Apparently he's named Joseph after Joseph Joestar.
Really?
Huh.
I don't know if that's true or not, but like I said, I found that on a couple different listings, so hey. The JoJo manga was popular in Japan long before it wasn't everywhere else, so it's very possible.
I honestly didn't hear about until, like, they were, like, part 3 of the anime.
Speaking of Wesker, though, in their looks, he just looks like off-brand Duke Nukem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's fair. That's really fair.
Wesker's like, what do you mean you lost the T-virus? Go find it.
Yeah, that Wesker.
Oh, God. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, the voice acting.
Oh, yes, no, it was so bad.
Well, I mean, just game voice acting back then was something special.
Okay, to be fair, yes, it was very early video game voice acting. The voice actors were not experienced, but...
Oh, no.
And personally, I think this just adds a lot to that B-movie amateur charm to the game. It's more hilarious than anything, but you cannot take it seriously whatsoever. It is so stilted and wooden. The delivery is just it is just not there. Who could forget such iconic lines such as, Jill, you do not have a weapon, Barry says to Jill as she's holding a handgun right in front of his face.
You were almost a Jill sandwich. It might be handy if you, the master of locking, take it with you.
There are so many infamous lines in this game that it is just ridiculous. When you confront the final boss when it breaks out of its tube, throws your companion against the wall, Jill just stares at this horrible act of violence and says in the most monotone, bored voice, it cannot control its actions.
Oh no, he's dead.
He's a shadow of his former self, the description of a mangled corpse says. And to be fair, I know there is also, translation issues as well, but yeah, this game is campy in its purest form. It is trying to be horror, but I think there's definitely a little bit, at least I hope so, that there's some self-awareness going on, because this game cannot be taken as a serious, actually scary horror. There's a couple jump scares, don't get me wrong, and I think it does atmosphere fairly well, but the voice acting and the plot development just kill all source of tension for me. Even, like, I know this was a year or two later, but even Metal Gear Solid, like, you compare the voice acting to this, and it is night and day.
But of course, it is just a product of its time, having the game industry not be as big as what it is today.
Speaking of a product of its time, what is with Jill's physics? Because, okay, every time I moved her, it just, like, everywhere she moves, it just jiggles. Why is this here? It doesn't have to be.
I think that's only in the remastered version. The original PS1 did not have the polygons for that, but...
Yeah, physics didn't exist back then.
Right. To answer your question, because it's a Japanese game in the early 2000s, that's why. You need to have that boob jiggle.
Ah, gotcha.
We will only have equality when Chris Redfield has jiggle physics.
Yes, that's it.
Get those proper jiggled pecs.
Yeah, like, where's his?
There is another character that I forgot to mention. She's the main companion in Chris's storyline, because this game does have two storylines based on who you play as. You can play as Chris or Jill, and they each have a different companion. In Jill's storyline, it's Barry, and in Chris's storyline, it's the sole survivor of the Bravo S.T.A.R.S team that was sent ahead of you, Rebecca Chambers. She's a medic. If I remember correctly, there's a brief section where Chris is like trapped or pinned for a moment, and you have to play as Rebecca for a little bit in order to rescue him, so I thought that was pretty cool, playing as a different character. As the story goes, the S.T.A.R.S team are trapped inside a giant mansion that is filled with crawling zombies, demon dogs, these weird... What are these things? They're called hunters, but they're like these mutant claw werewolf-looking things.
I don't know, I remember them being kind of like creepy to look at, like back in the day.
I do enjoy their ability to jump. It's scary.
Yeah, some of them will climb on the ceiling and you have to aim up to shoot them. I like the sound they make, especially when you kill them. It's a satisfying, like, high-piercing, screeching noise, but maybe that's just me.
What about those? So, we have the zombies, but then we have the red ones that have, like, the claws and stuff. They run, like, super fast. What are they?
I don't recall if, like, lickers were in the game yet.
Those were introduced in 2.
Okay.
I think those were the T-virus mutant zombies.
Don't they, like, come back to life or something like that if you don't burn them?
Well, sometimes zombies wouldn't stay dead even after they fell to the ground, because you would try to walk past them after they drop and they would grab onto your leg or something, so yeah, double tap, people. Did Zombieland teach us nothing?
Yeah.
I do like how after you kill an enemy, it stays dead in that room. They don't respawn. Some new enemies may reappear later on in the game, but I do like that how it feels like you are securing this house. You are winning it back room by room. There's a couple bosses in the game, too. There's a giant snake. There's a giant plant that you have to poison.
Plant 42.
Yeah, Plant 42. You have to poison its roots with the V-Jolt serum. And can we talk about that puzzle real quick? You're given, not really cryptic, it's fairly easy to follow of like, okay, 1 plus 2 equals 3, 4 plus 3 equals 7, 7 is purple, water is 1, red is 2, mix all the colors together, you get V-Jolt. It's a little confusing just keeping track of it, or maybe that's just because I suck at math, but how'd you guys think about that puzzle?
Kind of tedious for me, personally.
It sounds annoying.
In a lot of ways, this game kind of feels like a next step up from a point-and-click adventure game, and I kind of like that. I don't know, it just kind of took me back to that time, because you move around as a character and you can fight enemies and stuff, but when you get down to it, the gameplay loop is go into a room, click on item, use item to open door, repeat. Yeah, it's basically a glorified point-and-click adventure game, and I enjoyed it for that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, but also, like, you look at, like, the layout of how you go throughout the entire mansion, and just, it's a really weird layout if you think of it, like, as a residential area, as, like, an actual home.
It reminded me of the movie Clue, in the sense that every room of the mansion kind of looks and feels different from each other.
Yeah.
I want to know what the architecture plans of this mansion were. Okay, this room's gonna be Victorian style. This room's gonna have dark green wallpaper. This room's gonna look like a cabin.
But you also have to give it the thing that it's also a laboratory.
Yeah, it's just a front for Umbrella Corp.
But then as a front from going to all that detail to, like, make it all look different.
And they added traps to the mansion. Like, if you try to take the shotgun off the wall without putting the fake one on to replace it, the ceiling will cave in on you.
I feel like that's a common thing in, like, a lot of, the Resident Evil games where it's, like, there'll always be, like, a shotgun that you gotta do some kind of thing to be able to get it.
Why can't I just cock my pump-action shotgun and go out there and shoot some zombies? It's too much to ask.
I'm just gonna go gun store.
There's also that one puzzle, from cradle to grave, where you have to select all the paintings of a boy going through life in the right order from like a baby up to old age. And I'm like, this is a very existential puzzle. And okay, what was the most annoying enemy to fight for you guys? Because for me, it was the crows. I could not kill these crows for the life of me. They were so annoying.
The dogs.
I'm gonna have to agree with the crows. They were the worst.
Yeah, Garrett, you said earlier that the dogs were the bane of your existence, but I didn't have too much issue with the dogs. What was tricky about them for you?
Okay, when it first started out, like eventually as the game went on, dogs weren't as big as a problem. But in the beginning, I hated the dogs because the aiming and the mechanics and the fighting, I cringed so hard trying to shoot these dogs that are moving 10 times faster than the zombies that I'm so used to shooting. Eventually, it was fine. But as for the crows, I'm surprised the crows were kind of hard for you. I just found if you backed yourself into a corner, they would all kind of loom over you, and all you have to do is just point straight up, and then just start
When
shooting.
I played it, I was a small child that didn't realize these kind of mechanics. I was a small child at the time.
I was a small child of 48 hours ago. I can attest to this. Well, it's good to know that in the event of an actual zombie apocalypse, which of the three of us would survive the longest? Garrett.
He's going back in the corner and shoot all the crows.
Guys, get over here!
The boss fight for the plant itself wasn't too tricky. I just unloaded shotgun blasts into that thing. But that one vine sticking out of the ground that you could never dodge, it would always grab you, that was annoying. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it is just kind of annoying when you're backtracking to the storage save room and back to where the plant is, and it's always grabbing you.
Yeah, like I can't count how many times I have been strangled by that thing, and my gosh, why couldn't they put like a duck mechanic? Please.
That reminds me, in order to poison the plant, you have to go to its roots down in the basement of like, I think it's called a guardhouse or a dormitory or something.
The dormitory, I believe, yeah.
The entire basement is flooded because for some reason, Umbrella Corp just wanted to have a giant aquarium full of sharks in this one guardhouse basement. And by the time you get down there, the sharks have broken out and there's water everywhere. It's swimming around.
I found it so funny when they would torpedo right at you.
Right.
I feel like this place is missing something. I know. Let's add a shark tank.
I just felt so bad for those sharks after you drain the water and they're just flopping around on the floor, suffocating. And I'm like, aw, poor sharkies.
They're just sharks being sharks, and you just come in and just murder them.
Look, you can test on humans and turn them into zombie mutants all you want, but the moment you start animal testing, that's where I draw the line. Umbrella Corp, you've gone too far.
They kill sharks.
They kill sharks.
For testing purposes.
We talked about this in our Dying Light episode, but Justin, what's your favorite type of zombie? Do you like the fast-running zombies? Do you like the Left 4 Dead paper-mache zombies? Do you like the giant naked zombies from Attack on Titan?
You got me with that last one. Well, when it comes to it, it really depends on the type of game I'm playing, if it's from a gameplay standpoint. Because if I'm gonna have, like, automatic weapons and enough ammo, I'm good with being sent with hordes of, like, sprinting zombies. But if it's something more closer akin to, like, what you tend to deal with in Resident Evil games, I do prefer the more slower, shuffling ones. Because when they start running at you and shit, you'd get overwhelmed in that way too easily.
Yeah, Resident Evil zombies are of the slow but sturdy type. They're going to take a lot of bullets to down, and that's really a core part of the Resident Evil experience, the classic experience at least, where you have to be very methodical in how you go about targeting enemies. Do you really need to use this one clip of pistol ammunition on this room of zombies, or should you preserve that ammo for a more dangerous enemy later? Do you take the gamble with your knife, which is going to save ammo, but it's also going to put you within arm's reach of a zombie? That sort of thing. You have to really pick and choose your battles in this game.
Either that or you could just practice parkour.
Or you can just equip the rocket launcher as Jill, the bazooka, and just blow them all up.
Oh, yeah.
Fuck you, zombie.
Another enemy I didn't have trouble with them, but I did find them annoying whenever they popped up, were the giant spiders, because when you killed a giant spider, a bunch of baby spiders would pop out, and those things, you could just kill them just by stepping on them. Stupid bug, you go squish now, but...
Squish.
It's like basically slime from Minecraft. That's basically what it is.
I spawned mini-me's.
Those spiders, though, I feel annoying, so I always just ran away. I always tried to juke them out. personally.
I would do those with the hunters. I would just try and cut around corners and catch them when they were jumping.
How dare you?
Can we talk about one particular subject? I didn't really know too much about her, but I enjoyed it whenever she would come on. It was Tracy. You remember her?
Tracy?
So it's the person who's like chained up. At least it's in the remake. Is that just the remake?
I don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't remember anyone named Tracy from that.
I'm sorry. It was Lisa.
Yeah, I think she was only in the remaster because there was nothing like that in the original.
Oh my god. Okay, well, anyways, basically, we kind of see her sporadically throughout. One, she like knocks you out in the cabin. You also throw her off a ledge. It's insane how many times you like meet her. You don't expect to keep meeting her, but I did like that continuity it had. I liked her design in the remake, kind of looking like Quasimodo.
While we're on the subject, though, of characters, there is a mention of Ada in one of the letters of the Umbrella Corp scientists when you get down to the laboratory.
Oh, there was?
Yeah, so when you finally get to the laboratory, the Umbrella Corp lab, in the last section of the game, you can pick up a letter from one of the scientists as he's dying, and it's addressed to Ada. And I'm just like, haha, foreshadowing of a future character. Speaking of that laboratory section, though, and of crazy character appearances, when you're flipping through all the Umbrella Corp classified files, it lists all of the various monsters that you've encountered so far. The dogs, the hunters, the sharks, which are called Neptunes. There's also a file staff photo of Umbrella Corp members and Wesker. This is how you find out that Wesker is actually an undercover agent for Umbrella Corp who's sabotaging S.T.A.R.S. They had to put the sunglasses on Wesker in the photo in order for you to recognize it's him.
No, he's just really stoned. He's trying to hide his bloodshot eyes.
Takes off. He has this showering gun.
Yeah. Well, up to this point, you've only seen him wearing sunglasses, but also you probably wouldn't even remember Wesker at this point. He disappears once you get into the mansion. He's like, oh, I'm gonna go check this room. Be right back. And then he never comes back, just like my dad.
Pro gamer move.
I just find it funny that Wesker is just wearing sunglasses for no apparent reason indoors. Yeah, so Wesker, he turns out to be the main villain. He sabotaged S.T.A.R.S by luring them into the mansion. He's working for Umbrella Corp to cover up the zombie outbreak. Depending on your storyline, he either takes Chris into the lab to show off the Tyrant, which is the ultimate bioweapon. It's basically an 8-foot-tall naked guy with a mutant claw for an arm. Like that's it. And I just like how Chris or Jill just start roasting the fuck out of Tyrant when he's in his incubation test tube. Because Wesker's like, behold, Umbrella Corp's ultimate bioweapon. And they're just like, this is what Umbrella Corp is researching and developing. As Chris so elegantly puts it, you think this failure is your savior? Oh, that line.
Yeah.
It's like, it was gonna be great, but then now it's like, no, fuck you guys. You guys came at me. You're gonna die now.
I just honestly felt bad for the Tyrant and Wesker in that moment. Wesker's just like showing off his new pet to them, and they're just roasting the fuck out of it. They're like, hey, well, look how stupid it looks.
I think the prototype was like super friendly until after the roast.
Umbrella Corp was just breeding the ultimate friend, and Chris and Jill just made it evil and hate humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna do a gamer move, annihilate S.T.A.R.S.
So I know we're jumping to the end a little bit, but since we're here, we might as well talk about it. The final boss fight against Tyrant, how'd you guys feel about it?
It was cool. I mean, I kind of expected a little bit more. Getting a rocket launcher was pretty cool.
I forgot to mention this, but the helicopter pilot, Brad, I got something to say about Brad.
Where the fuck were you?
Yeah, he just abandons S.T.A.R.S right at the beginning of the game. Like, the moment they get ambushed by the dogs, he's just like, fuck this shit, I'm out. And he just flies away.
I just imagine him, like, when he's just leaving, he just chuckles like, those guys are so fucking dead.
Okay, yes, he does come back at the very end in order to rescue everybody, and he does toss a rocket launcher down to the ground to defeat Tyrant. And in the Jill storyline, after he throws the rocket launcher down, he's like, go on, Jill, you're our Amazon lady.
Another perfect line.
I forget what he says to Chris, but... Yeah, the final boss fight against Tyrant, it's pretty straightforward. You just run around a helicopter pad shooting at it. Eventually, Brad throws a rocket launcher down. It's pretty satisfying to blow that thing up. I will say, in the remastered version, the way Tyrant rushes at you in order to stab you, it is a little on the uncanny valley side of movement. That thing is moving in a weird... it's probably just me, but the way Tyrant moved freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah, but I've noticed that with a lot of things, like if things like lunge or run very quickly in games, their movement doesn't match up with their speed, and it tends to just be really weird. But also, one thing I just remembered from doing research for this episode was apparently there was supposed to be a Game Boy Color version of the game. It never got released, and the closest thing is that there was like this one guy who apparently had an unfinished ROM of it as a Game Boy Color cartridge.
It's kind of interesting how many versions there are out there.
Kind of like the Bible. Got a lot of versions going on.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Bible, Umbrella Corp's password that you read through the MO discs are just quotes from the book of Genesis. So, we got to get in that playing God biblical analogy thrown in here, because why not?
Gotta make them believe in something. We're dealing with them bioweapons, son.
One of the more recognizable iconography of Resident Evil games that I'm pretty sure is in every Resident Evil game are the herbs. In this one, there's 3 different colored herbs. You got the green herb, which heals you. You got the blue one, which cures poison and toxin. And you have the red one, which doesn't do anything by itself, but you can combine it to increase the potency of the other herbs.
I do like when stuff like puts in some crafting by using like plant life as well as like life in nature. I just like doing that, and I think that's kind of the part with the survival, because like in the game, you can combine items. I feel like that's the real big one, where you actually combine to create a healing item of sorts.
You were able to make that choice. Oh, just smacked my mic by accident. You would have like your herbs that you could either take now to heal, or it's like you had to think like, do I want to save these and be able to combine them later on to get into something more useful?
It is very much a godsend where finding a green herb lying on the floor after taking a lot of damage in a particularly challenging fight. It's like, finally, salvation.
It's the flex seal of Resident Evil.
I do have to wonder, what do you do with the herbs? Because when you mix it together, it looks like a powder. So I'm like, do you snort it? Do you rub it on your wounds?
Just shove it in there.
Yeah, I think it's like pop rockets. Like you just put them in and it's a party.
Chris just snorting lines of green herbs, and Jill's like, Chris, I don't think... No, chill out, Jill. It's organic.
He just pulls out like his credit card and a dollar bill, rolls that up, just lines it up with the card, cutting the line.
Oh man, this red herb hits different.
You want to hit this shit?
Yeah, the herbs, they're an iconic piece of Resident Evil, like I said. I'm pretty sure they're in every Resident Evil game.
Do you feel like this use of herbs, like when did we start kind of using herbs as sort of like these healing items? Did Resident Evil really do that? Or was there a game before it? Because I noticed it's in a lot of games.
I think, as Resident Evil itself points out, when you first find out about the herbs in the library, it does say, since time immemorial, humans have been using plants for medical purposes. So I wouldn't be surprised if in video games, people would associate plants with healing just because that's a thing that's common in real life. But now that you mention it, I do see what you mean, though, Garrett. Was Resident Evil the first game to kind of incorporate plants as a healing item? Because I know like food and stuff has been a staple healing item since, you can heal in video games. But now that you mention it, I have to think about that. Was Resident Evil the first game to at least popularize medical plants and herbs in video games? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like Far Cry. In Far Cry 3, you can like just grab these different colored plants, and by combining them, you get different effects.
Wouldn't surprise me given how influential Resident Evil franchise is. I mean, this game basically invented survival horror.
Yeah, and now like survival games have become so much more in depth now, where it's kind of weird for a survival game to not have crafting and all this other stuff in it.
We talked about this in Outlast, where there was a time where survival horror was basically just a glorified walking sim where you couldn't really fight back against monsters. Resident Evil has always been like, nah, here's a shotgun, go hog wild.
It's great because like then you have like all these different versions of horror now that you can cater to your taste.
Oh no, don't get me wrong. I think think there's a place for all sorts of gaming niches. I just find it funny that I feel like part of the reason why everyone liked 7 when it came out, because it came out in that era.
Yeah, especially because like 7 was like the first like first person Resident Evil game too.
Right. That's another thing I found out about development. Originally, this game, the first one, was going to be first person.
Oh, that would have been interesting.
But they ended up going with the third person tank controls because it would have been way too taxing on the PS1 hardware at the time to like keep the areas and everything loaded in and in good resolution. And I have to say, I really like this era of 2D video game backgrounds, like these pre-rendered areas that you traverse through. Final Fantasy VII does this as well. A lot of games from this era did this. It was just the style at the time where it's a 3D character and models on a 2D background made to look like a 3D environment. But I just really like the specific look of this era. There's just something so cozy 90s about it, this low polygon, pre-rendered environment. And like I said, Final Fantasy VII also does this as well, and I really like how the backgrounds in that game really look. I just really like this era of environmental graphics.
If you like look at a lot of modern games now, like there's not a whole lot of mainstream like AAA titles, but there's a lot of like smaller indie games where they go back to that style because a lot of people find that style nostalgic, or it's just a nice style. It works really well for a lot of horror games too. Like I find like ones in that kind of style that we make now tend to be kind of a little bit more scarier than a lot of the more polished games, I guess you could call it.
Right. Well, it's because we are currently in the nostalgia era of this generation where people who grew up on the PS1 and N64 are now making games. So that's why now you look on Steam, like you said, Justin, there's a lot of these games that are modeled after this era in graphics and visual style. So I'm all for it.
Now, I don't mean to get all philosophical and stuff, but speaking of how you were saying you prefer the older graphics to horror games, is it because it looks old that it gives that kind of creepy, eerie, ancient feeling?
Yeah, it's a lot more unsettling because things just don't look quite right. It reaches like that uncanny valley type of area where nowadays it's like it's not quite as uncanny. It's creepy to look at, but it's not as disturbing.
That's a major thought process behind the genre of analog horror. You guys are familiar with analog horror, right?
Yep, totally.
Oh yeah, I love analog horror. It's great.
The reason why a lot of analog horror is based off of like VHS tapes or like very early internet or 90s era technology is specifically because of that. It's old. It's just something that doesn't really have a place in modern society. So whenever you encounter it, it unnerves you a little bit because you're wondering, why is it here? It doesn't resemble what a modern equivalent would look like.
And I have another thought too that kind of plays in that whole nostalgia area because like we remember that stuff as kids, and because we're kids, it's a lot more scarier for us. I wonder if us liking that puts us back in that like nostalgic child sense of like this is now scarier.
Have you guys seen the movie Skinamarink?
Nope.
I haven't even heard of that.
Oh, I highly recommend Skinamarink. I think it just came out like either early this year or sometime last year. I would have to double check when it came out. It's a recent movie, but I think it is what analog horror should strive to do. Maybe not in style, but just in terms of how it delivers and how it carries about its horror. It's a horror movie about these two children trapped in their home, and there's something in the home with them.
Ooh, that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, you don't know what it is exactly. Is it a monster? Is it a ghost, a demon? Is it just a human that's broken into the house?
Yeah, we should watch that.
It's a raccoon.
Yeah, it's a raccoon. It is one of the most unnerving, most unsettling horror movies I've seen ever. Skinamarink. Highly recommend it if you're a horror fan.
Back on topic.
Yeah. Back where the residents are evil.
Said every landlord.
Dadgummit, why ain't they paying their rent?
I'm surprised, no members of the IRS have come here to charge Umbrella Corp with their property taxes.
It's a extended reach of corporate power.
Let's talk about Umbrella Corp a little bit in this game. The evil corporation behind it all, developing the T virus, turning animals and people into zombies. It was capitalism all along.
I think my idea was kind of like more coming from what I remembered from from the movies, but I remembered it being like a thing where they were also going like kind of no, wasn't that Ada's thing where she was going to like sell it to like the highest bidder or something like that.
It's been a while since I've played the games Ada's in, but it's a mix of selling it to highest bidders, but also like exposing the truth of Umbrella Corp to the public or like the mass media and stuff, so Umbrella Corp gets taken down. I do have to wonder, though, because tying back into an earlier conversation piece, what was the thought process behind all these booby traps throughout the mansion and the underground tunnel? Because in order to get to the laboratory, you have to go through these underground tunnels beneath the mansion, and there's parts of the tunnel that you have to rotate with a crank in order to pass through, which I really like those puzzles. Those were cool.
Did like all the employees just have to deal with that? This shit again.
Yeah, like how do you get in from like a day-to-day basis? Like, my commute to work.
Who has that crank?
I gotta put the sun, the star, the moon metals back into the piece. Oh shit, has anyone seen the wind metal? There's giant boulders, Indiana Jones style, that go down the tunnels and chase you.
You gotta be an athlete.
One day, Chris will have his revenge on these boulders. He hasn't yet learned you can just beat boulders into submission.
And that filthy rock puncher.
I will tell you, while in the tunnels, there was this one particular in-game jump scare that I kind of flew off. Do you remember that jump scare where the hunter kind of like jumps around the corner as you're like heading back? like that shit scared me. Like, holy fuck.
That one got me, but I also had a fully loaded shotgun at the time, so I just unloaded into that sucker.
I only had my pistol. I was screwed.
I like to imagine Umbrella Corp, the board members include such astute executives as Dr. Evil, Dr. Doofenshmirtz.
Don't bring Dr. Doofenshmirtz into Umbrella.
Ah, Chris Redfield, what an unexpected surprise. And by unexpected, I mean unexpected. What are you doing here?
I always found Skeletor just because of the memes. I am not nice.
There's also that one puzzle that it's not really a puzzle. You just have to find the music sheets.
Oh, yeah.
But you have to play Moonlight Sonata on the piano to open a secret passageway. And I like how Jill can play the piano, but Chris can't. So you have, in Chris's storyline, you have to get Rebecca to do it for you.
Hey, play me a little ditty on that piano.
You may have noticed we haven't really said much about the characters, and that's because there's not really much to say. And yes, I know Chris and Jill are main characters in the upcoming games. There's more to say about them, but regarding this first entry, they're kind of straightforward archetypes. Chris is the generic action soldier guy, but if I'm being honest, I kind of like that, you know? He doesn't have to be anything more. He's just your typical soldier in a zombie-esque apocalypse. Jill is basically the same. She is, final girl in a horror movie type of vibe. She's a little bit more, I guess...
a damsel in distress.
I mean, you do play as her. She does have guns and she can fight stuff. It's just, she's just a bit more, for lack of a better term, emotional in the way she reacts to the monsters and stuff than Chris. Because
she's a stereotype, especially from that era.
To be honest, I feel like anyone would have the same reaction as Jill. I would be like, oh shit.
Oh, I'm not blaming her.
Yeah, it's like, I would not handle myself well.
Oh no, I'm just saying from like a writing perspective, the way she reacts to monsters compared to Chris. But then again, at least she has a reaction. I feel like Chris just doesn't really react. He's just like, oh my god, they're eating her, and then they're going to eat me. Oh my god.
Around that, with that game too, they definitely put a lot more attention to like the gameplay and story versus the characters, because it wasn't really specifically about the characters, more about the scenario that they're in.
Right. And of course, in classic action horror movie fashion, you have to blow up the Umbrella Corp lab. There's a 3-minute countdown timer before everything self-destructs. In the remastered version, they fixed this, but in the original, the countdown timer is still going. It's only 3 minutes during cutscenes when you can't do anything. Then you have to fight Tyrant on top of the countdown timer, and you only have like a minute left by the time it gets there because it's still going down when you're riding the elevator.
It wouldn't be that time period for action if you didn't have a countdown and then an explosion.
It's still doable. I still beat the game with like 20 seconds to spare, but still. And then Brad, the helicopter pilot, comes back. He rescues Chris, Jill, Rebecca, and Barry if they're alive.
He just shows up like, hey, what's going on here, guys?
They fly off into the sunset, happily ever after. Nothing bad will ever happen in Raccoon City ever again. But in the remastered version, I think there's like a little section at the end of the game where you play as Wesker and he's revealed to still be alive.
Mm-hmm. I think that's just to like bridge it into, because like I think I heard Wesker in other Resident Evil games. Is he in other Resident Evil games?
Yeah, he's in Code Veronica.
I don't think he's like in any of the other like games of the main series, but he's on like some of the other like Resident Evil games. Yeah.
Okay, so this gets into my, not a conspiracy theory, but I need to know, I can't be alone in thinking this. Does anyone else get very similar vibes or see any parallels between Resident Evil and Jurassic Park in terms of like aesthetic and atmosphere?
I don't know about Jurassic Park. I guess, what do you mean? Can you give us an example?
Okay, hear me out on this. So this is something I have always felt like. Jurassic Park and Resident Evil have very similar visual aesthetics in terms of that military, industrial, scientist, corporate lab kind of feel to it, where you take the lab in Jurassic Park, you take the lab in Resident Evil, and I know, oh wow, a laboratory, what else is it gonna look like? But Resident Evil is basically Jurassic Park, but with zombies instead of dinosaurs. It's a corporation developing and breeding these monsters for private grandeur purposes. Jurassic Park, it's dinosaurs for a theme park. And in Jurassic World, this even gets further into my personal theory. Jurassic World, it's for military purposes, turning dinosaurs into bioweapons, just like how zombies in Resident Evil are. And the helicopter escape sequence at the end feels very Jurassic Park, because I swear, the first 3 Jurassic Park movies end with the heroes barely escaping all this chaos in a helicopter.
A pterodactyl flies over the mountains, comes screeching down.
I mean, I see what you're saying, but I just never really felt that.
Like, replace the zombies in Resident Evil with, like, velociraptors or something. Oh, wait, they did that, because this further fuels my interpretation of this. A lot of the same people who made Resident Evil went on to make Dino Crisis on PS1 as well, which is basically Resident Evil meets Jurassic Park.
Chase, I think, like, your theory does have some ground, but I will say, I don't know, I don't think so.
I am not crazy. The parallels are there, sheeple. Open up your eyes.
I'm
telling
sorry.
you, Jurassic Park and Resident Evil are 2 sides of the same coin. They are the same franchise. They are taking place in a jungle/mountains. One has zombies, one has dinosaurs. So the only solution is in Resident Evil 9 Jurassic World, we are going to have zombie dinosaurs.
Zombosaurs.
Life always finds a way, I guess.
The signs are there, people. Open up your eyes. There is some aesthetic connection between Resident Evil and Jurassic Park.
I don't doubt there could have been inspiration from the story of Jurassic Park in terms of the Umbrella Corporation. Because usually that's what happens. I mean, or just things fall into a trope that just happens to be.
I mean, there's only so many original ideas where things just kind of become, like, original, but they're still inspired by something else. I do see what you're saying.
In pop culture, there's nothing new under the sun. You realize very quickly that everything is just inspired by other things.
Yeah, but they still change it enough where it feels fresh at least.
Well, yeah, so that's Resident Evil, the first entry. The original game was released in 1996. A director's cut version was made in 1997, mostly to tide people over until Resident Evil 2 came out. I don't think it changed too much. I think it tweaked the difficulty and shook a couple, like, puzzles up a little bit, but other than that, I don't think there's anything too different about the versions. It did add some new outfits for the characters, though, so they got new drip.
Oh, yeah, gotta get that drip.
It was remastered on the GameCube in 2002, which was then itself remastered in HD in 2015. And yeah, that's the first Resident Evil. And I think it's a pretty solid entry overall. Product of its time, but it holds up and it is very ridiculous. I think if you're getting into Resident Evil, it's a good place as any to start. While I personally would recommend starting with the remake of 2, I think if you started with the remastered version of 1 or even the original version, so long as you're willing to cope with its age, I think it's a pretty good starting point. I think this series put a strong first foot forward. Everything that you associate with Resident Evil is here right at the start, so recommend give it a go.
I think my idea is, like, if it's someone who's used to, like, those older type of games, they can start with 1, but if they're more, like, newer to, like, the whole games or more used to, like, more modern stuff, then definitely, yeah, start with like the remake of 2 or something like that.
I will say that, yeah, it's great for the genre. It was a pioneer for survival type games, and I think it landed pretty successfully, selling over 2 million copies, I believe.
Oh yeah, it began one of the most influential horror series in all of video games.
It is a very important piece of gaming history. Definitely recommend checking it out. It definitely stands where it is and should be respected for what it is and what came from it.
I haven't played too many of older games, and it was a little bit of a chore to get into, but I feel if you power through it, there will be more moments that you will enjoy the game than you will feel like it's very tedious.
Yeah, it's a fairly short game too. Like, I think each individual storyline is only a handful of hours long, assuming you don't get lost anywhere.
It's before they added all that other stuff to pad it out and make you play forever.
Right, like, I beat the Jill storyline in only like 5 hours, and I think the Chris storyline was only slightly longer, but that's because I didn't know what I was doing at the time. So yeah, it's a fairly quick game. One last thing before we go. I just want to throw a quick mention to the end credit song. It does not fit this game whatsoever. It sounds like something out of a 1980s rom-com
Straight
movie.
out of left field. Like, I guess like The Mansion. The Mansion's the only thing that could be like a rom-com.
I don't know what the song is, sadly, so I can't really reminisce with this.
Chris, Jill, the other survivors, they're so traumatized by the events that have unfolded over the course of the night, and then it just plays the Full House theme song or end credit song.
You go everywhere
you look.
And, okay, but can you imagine, like, what if that was Brad turning on the radio and that was where the end credits?
Hold on, it was 1998. I'm curious, what were some of the top 40 songs that they could have listened to in 1998?
I don't know, but either way, like, I felt like it was a questionable music choice.
Well, they got The Boy Is Mine by Monica, they got Body Bumpin', they got Ghetto Superstar.
Do you think they did it for the kids, just being like, remember, it's still a game, don't have nightmares?
I mean, again, it does fit in with that whole campy pulpiness that this game embodies so much of, but it's not a bad song by any means. I think it's a nice little groove, but it does not fit with the tone that this game was striving for.
Something that reminds me of a lot of is a lot of anime that I've watched where like there'll be this horrible scene, some character just died, and then like, or for example Bleach, and then they come up with a song and it's this happy upbeat song with the lyrics happy people right after you just watch someone die, and it's the most jarring thing.
God, I think Game of Thrones did that when, like, spoilers, Jaime got his hand cut off and it just cuts to like this upbeat folky rock tune. As the old internet meme was, something horrifically traumatizing just happened. Cue happy credits music.
Yeah.
We can talk about stuff that actually unnerved us about this game. That first time you encounter a zombie, it's munching on the corpse of a S.T.A.R.S comrade, and then it slowly turns towards the camera and it's got blood over its face. And yeah, the original doesn't really hold up, it's early CGI, but I think for the time it would have been nightmare-inducing.
When I first saw that scene, that creeped me out quite a bit. And then I remember seeing some people play the remake where they redid that scene, and it looks so good. They did so well with it.
It was definitely the one in the tunnels for me that was the most memorable. The others, it was like, oh, I've seen this before in this video game. But I will say it still built tension knowing that something is at least out there, because I'm still staying wary.
I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but back in the days of when like video game rental stores were a thing, I remember being a young child and seeing the cover to Resident Evil 2 on display. I just couldn't look away from that. It both freaked me out and also fascinated me. Another thing that it's not that scary in hindsight, but it did kind of jump scare me the first time I played this game. There's a couple moments where you enter a room and then it cuts to like the room you just came from the POV of a monster that's chasing you. Like, I think the first time it happens is when hunters are introduced. And the first time that happened to me, I'm just like, oh shit, what's coming towards me? We, the audience, see it coming, but the character doesn't. And because it's a video game, we are soon going to have to experience what the character is about to experience. So
yeah, and it's kind of like they do that with like horror movies too. Like I feel like I remember that happening several times in the Friday the 13th movies, where you'll see like it from Jason's perspective for a few moments while he's walking up to someone, and then it cuts to that person, and a few months later kills them.
It happens again a second time when you're rattling through the kitchen and a zombie comes down the stairs and opens the previously locked door, and it's like, oh, okay, thanks for opening the door, zombie. Gunshot to the head.
Down, doggy.
What's the Alfred Hitchcock? I think it was Alfred Hitchcock that said there's a few different ways to build tension in an audience. If you have two characters sitting at a dinner table and all of a sudden the table explodes, that's a jump scare. If you show the characters having dinner at a table, but then you show the audience that there's a bomb taped underneath the table, then that's tension. That's drama right there.
Yeah, and then also like music can do that, and lighting. There's so many things that can play an effect to build tension.
All the door loading screen cutscenes. The first time I played this game, I was definitely on edge the first few times I had to do that because I kept expecting something to be on the other side of the door, and there never was. It's just a loading screen. But the staircase loading screen as well, where you're ascending or descending a staircase into darkness. Again, I kept waiting. Okay, there's going to be like a face jumping out at the bottom of the staircase.
Can you imagine if it was like a smiling person's face at the bottom of the ladder watching you climb down?
I do like the mansion itself, though. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I love mansions as a horror setting. There's something about the concept of a giant residential house that you are trapped in. You don't know what's in there. Anything can be at anywhere at any point. You don't know what's around the corner. There's a lot of places to hide for both you or the monster.
I think it's because a lot of documentaries and movies tend to bring mansions and houses and stuff, and I think as a society the media has really put mansions as like, not given that the size of the building is of course a big part of it, but I'm just saying media also like propelled that fear to being like just constant always feeling that fear.
Right. It's very ominous. It's so big and imposing and intimidating.
Yeah, because I mean, you never really hear someone talk about like a mansion or a really big house as being like cozy. Those are always like nice smaller houses that feel cozy, where something like that, it's like you never know what's on the other side of the house.
Maybe we're scared of mansions because we associate them with billionaires, and what's more terrifying than that?
What's more terrifying than Jeffrey Bezos?
I think another reason why mansions are such a cool setting for stories, horror especially, is because as Resident Evil itself, or like I said, Clue indicate, you can get away with a lot of different interior architecture design ideas, so you can keep the visuals very interesting, where this room is going to be very gothic. This room is going to have a bunch of stuffed animals, like a hunting lodge kind of vibe to it. You have outdoor gardens, vineyards, that kind of stuff. So it's a very multi-purpose setting for being set in only one location. Or maybe I'm just a fan of big houses that go burr.
Could you imagine like if I don't know, like an inspector came up to the mansion to like make sure everything's up to code and there isn't like any unapproved add-ons?
Why is there a track under the statue? Why is this statue holding a shield with spikes on it?
This gas chamber puzzle that you have to push Roman statues over, that's not up to code. The Homeowners Association is not going to approve of this wallpaper color.
And it's a whole underground laboratory. I don't see any of this on the blueprints. It doesn't look like you got permission to build this by the county.
The like blue and green hallway where the tiger statue is that you have to put the jewels in, and also where the first time you encounter a dangerous plant in the fountain. I really like that look of the room. It has that liminal space type of look to it. It feels very Twin Peaksy, that section of the mansion.
Okay, can we just say, like, that greenhouse is in a very weird place?
A lot of the rooms are in weird places. Like, why is the kitchen, I'm pretty sure the kitchen is in, like,
the basement?
And, like, there's no bedrooms, I don't think.
There's some bedrooms, yeah.
Yeah, I just remembered there are some bedrooms. Well, I think that just about wraps it up. I don't think there's anything else to say. Do you guys have anything else?
No, I think we covered just about all of it.
All right, well, thank you again for listening, everybody. Going forward, we will now be renamed to Backwards Incompatible. I know, 2 letters, a whole extra syllable, such a huge branding change, but Backwards Incompatible will be our name going forward. And also, Justin will be joining us permanently as a co-host moving forward.
Woo!
So
Yay, me.
welcome, Justin.
There we go.
I'm happy to be here.
And for you listeners out there, if you want to get into contact with us, you can email us at backwardscompatiblepod@gmail.com. gmail.com. Or you can leave us a review on your podcast listening platform of choice. And we like reading through all of your guys' reviews. It's very positive. Keep up the good feedback. In the meantime, I've been your co-host Chase.
And I've been your host, Justin.
Now I'm Garrett.
Thank you all for listening.